Hello there, you're watching India Global on NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The next half hour is packed with all the big international stories of the week and those that directly matter to India. But before the details and the analysis, a look at the big stories making global headlines. Former US President Donald Trump faces a second indictment, this time over alleged mishandling of classified documents. But the 2024 presidential aspirant brazens it out, says he's the target of a witch hunt. Senior American officials make their way to New Delhi ahead of Prime Minister Modi's first state visit to the US. NSA Jake Sullivan in India next week after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin prepares the ground for a possible joint production of GE jet engines with HAL. Agreement likely to be announced on 22nd June after a clearance from the US Congress. 700 Indians face an uncertain future in Canada after being duped by agents in Punjab, sit on a protest as they face deportation over allegations of having studied on fake offer letters from universities. India takes up the matter with Canada. Story at the moment. Troubles mount for former US President Donald Trump. He will now be indicted on charges of mishandling of classified documents and violation of Espionage Act. But despite the setback, Donald Trump remains brazen. He calls himself innocent and the target of a witch hunt.
Sadly, we're a nation in decline, and yet they go after a popular president, a president that got more votes than any sitting president in the history of our country, by far, and did much better the second time in the election than the first. And they go after him on a boxer's hoax. I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent person. They had the Mueller hoax, the Mueller report, and that came out. No collusion after 2.5 years. That was set up by Hillary Clinton and Democrats. But this is what they do. This is what they do so well. If they would devote their energies to honesty and integrity, it would be a lot better for our country.
So what are the charges against Donald Trump in this second indictment? The first charge is of willful retention of national defense information for documents that were found in Mar-a-Lago in his estate in Florida. Now, the second charge against him is that of, in fact, as you can see those details coming in, of conspiracy as well, because he was trying to obstruct justice as they claim that he did not cooperate in this matter. Withholding a document or record, corruptly concealing a document or record, these are the other two charges against him in this case. Concealing a document in a federal investigation, that's another charge. A scheme to conceal false statements and representation. So a total of 7 charges against Donald Trump. This is the second case in which he has been indicted. Remember, he's also been impeached twice, but of course that did not go through via the Senate. So troubles have been actually tracking Donald Trump down for the last few years. But what does it mean, especially now as he's trying to bid for a second presidential term in 2024? Can this indictment affect his presidential bid? Well, not constitutionally in the US. He will not be prevented from running for the post of the president in 2024. In fact, many Republicans believe that in the primaries, it might only boost his chances because of the sympathy that he might garner by calling this entire case a witch hunt against him. Meanwhile, there are others. There are other Republicans as well who believe and who have warned that in the long run this could hurt him. Why? Because even though he might be able to be the presidential candidate for the Republicans, he might end up losing the overall battle, that is the battle for 2024. So this is what is in store for Donald Trump at the moment. What we can clearly see is that Donald Trump's troubles are mounting. However, he is willing to brazen it out. We are now turning our attention to the other big story that we are tracking, directly impacting Indians. A Canadian parliamentary committee has voted unanimously to urge the border services agencies to stop the deportation of nearly 700 Indian students who were duped by unscrupulous education consultants in India to enter the country with fraudulent college admission letters. The Indian students, mostly from Punjab, have been protesting the move to deport them. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, meanwhile, has said that the Indian mission is in touch with the Canadian side to resolve this matter.
In the biggest immigration scam of Punjab, according to the state government, close to 700 Indian students in Canada facing the risk of deportation. Canadian authorities say these students got visas on the basis of fake admission letters. Students from Canada's Brampton say they have been given less than a month's time to leave Canada.
The life of all the international students is at stake. The few students are coming in front. The many organizations did their research and surveys. They found 50, 60 students. But some people, some students, they are suffering in silence. We have all the proofs. We have all the arguments, facts, which can prove us innocent, right? But still, the students are getting deportation dates. You know how expensive is the study in Canada. Their families, they put their whole life saving in this to finance the education here in Canada. So that's the main thing. We have to do something.
They are the big colleges for which we got the offer letters at first. Even a normal student can change the college here. The only thing is we changed the college. We went to another college. We completed our studies over there. Everything is normal in our files. It's just 4 years later they are saying this.
The Indian External Affairs Minister assured help in coordination with the Canadian Prime Minister, while it's still not clear how many alleged fraud cases are genuine.
If there were people who misled them, the culpable parties should be acted against. It is unfair to punish a student who undertook their education in good faith. If a student has done no wrong, they accept the idea that they have to find some solution for it. So we will continue to press, and I would very much hope that the Canadian system is fair in that regard.
Our focus is on identifying the culprits, not penalizing the victims. Victims of fraud will have an opportunity to demonstrate their situation and present evidence to support their case.
While the Canadian Prime Minister, the local MP, Mayor and Councillor have come out in support, these students say there is no real help from the Canadian government yet. Close to 2 lakh students from India go to Canada every year for higher studies. But as Indian students dream for international exposure, these stories highlight how their dreams make them vulnerable to frauds. And at the end, they're left helpless in a foreign country that was once their path to realize their dreams. Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.
And there are mounting woes for those looking to study abroad. 2 more Australian universities now have put a ban on enrolling students from states like Punjab and Haryana. This over what they believe are visa frauds and concerns around the visa frauds that they have been talking about. The Federation University in Victoria and the Western Sydney University in New South Wales are 2 of the new universities, institutions in Australia who are now putting a ban on students, especially from Punjab and Haryana. Meanwhile, those headed to Shanghai in China may have to shell out 54% more in fees from this September. The fees hike across provinces in China has been 15 to 54%. So, US, UK are the other places that many of the Indian students go to. On the other hand, there is some development in UK as well, where students headed there will no longer be able to take their families along as well. UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman, in a written statement to the House of Commons, has said that only international students on postgraduate courses currently designated as research programs will be allowed to bring in their family members, including children and elderly parents, as their dependents. Is this move likely to impact what UK calls the living bridge, with India? That is the big question over here. Let's go across now to the UK IBC chief, Richard McCallum, who is joining us on the show. Richard, many thanks for speaking with NDTV. First of all, is it likely to adversely impact the movement of students from India to the UK?
I think the first thing to say is that student mobility between the UK and India has been a hugely positive story. I think we had about 125,000 students from India studying in the UK in the last academic year, and something like 160,000 visas issued to Indian students up until September 22. Of course, I'm disappointed by these restrictions, but it's worth bearing in mind, I think, that it won't affect the majority of Indian students studying in the UK. The post-study work visa remains in place. There's no limit to the number of Indian students who can visit the UK to study. And UK universities really want to encourage more Indian students to come and work there. And there will be exceptions for students undertaking certain postgrad courses that are deemed as research programs.
So, you know, is the UK IBC keen on taking up this matter with the government, considering that the government itself calls the people-to-people contact the living bridge between India and the UK?
When the matter was first raised back in November 22, we did, on behalf of our members, we wrote to various UK government departments about the extraordinary benefits which Indian students bring to the UK. You know, Indian students, international students, all international students bring about £26 billion a year to the UK economy, and they improve academic and research strength in the sector, and they bring diversity and benefits to the campuses, and they bring skills which we need. I think it's worth mentioning, though, in the wider context, that in 2022, the UK issued about 2.8 million visas, and 25% of all of those went to India. And student visas went up by about 73% in 2021. And work visas increased by about 130% as well in the same period. So I think, you know, it's a largely positive story in terms of the living bridge between the UK and India.
Richard McCallum, many thanks for speaking with NDTV on India Global. So we've taken a look now at the UK and what this could mean. Let's take a look now at the US, where a lot of students go for studies as well. US has promised to make the path easy for students. They've said that last year, 1,25,000 Indians were issued students' visa, which is more than those that were issued to any other nationality. In fact, 1 out of every 5 student visas were issued in India last year. This year, they say that they will interview more students than ever before.
More Indians come to the United States as students than students from any other country in the world. Last year, India became #1. And I don't see years ahead that changing for the future. I see that relationship at the very top of how we articulate our values of welcoming not just Americans to higher education to pursue their dreams, but opening up that door to people from around the world, and specifically here in India, where the Indian dream mirrors the American dream.
Let's turn our attention to the other big story that we are continuing to track, that of the developments in the run-up to Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the United States. Now, senior American officials are making their way to New Delhi ahead of the Prime Minister's first state visit. NSA Jake Sullivan will be in India next week after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin prepares the ground for a possible joint production of GE jet engines with HAL. The agreement is likely to be announced on the 22nd of June, but this will come after a go-ahead from the US Congress. Now, though the stress is...
Before Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the US, top American officials are visiting India to lock the final agenda of talks between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. US NSA Jake Sullivan is travelling to India next week, but before that, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met his counterpart Rajnath Singh in Delhi. And all eyes are now on whether the two have been able to settle the big deal expected to be announced on 22nd June. The General Electric's Hindustan Aeronautics Limited agreement for joint production of their jet engines.
What is still unclear though is if the United States is willing to allow General Electric to transfer single crystal engine blade technology. What is this? It's an advanced manufacturing process that ensures that engine blades made of titanium are of the highest quality under extreme heat conditions. This is considered the holy grail of jet engine technology. Very few countries have this. India wants it as a stepping stone to building our own world-class engines.
India and the US concluded a new roadmap for US-India defense industrial cooperation, which according to the United States aims to change the paradigm for cooperation between US and Indian defense sectors, including a set of specific proposals that could provide India access to cutting-edge technologies and support India's defense modernization plans. India is a major defense partner of the United States, wants to finalize the deal to manufacture General Electric F414 engines in India to power the Made in India Tejas Mk2 fighter and a stealth fighter called the AMCA, a deal for the sale of 30 state-of-the-art MQ-9B drones, a $3 billion purchase if it happens. While India is increasing its defense equipment purchase basket to include other countries like France, Israel, US over the years, apart from the traditional partner Russia, many others making a pitch for a piece in the pie. Germany is looking at selling ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems submarine to India, a deal of 6 diesel-electric submarines at an estimated cost of $5.2 billion.
Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, said, "We are talking about a deal of TKMS, about 6 submarines, but of course the procedure is not finished yet. But I think the German industry is at a good place in that race."
The submarines under Project 75I will be built in India under a joint venture and transfer of technology with an international manufacturer.
As is clear from that package that though the stress is on Make in India, but India is also actively increasing its defense equipment purchase basket. While this will mean reduced dependence on traditional defense partner Russia, it will also, in fact, bolster India's capacities in face of the growing Chinese threat. At least that's the expectation over here. Let's try and understand this a little more with our guest, who will be able to give us a sense now of what this visit of the Prime Minister might look like to the US and whether defense is really going to be the thrust of this partnership, at least this time around during the PM's state visit. Richard Rosso, Vadvani Chair in the US-India Policy Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, is joining us live now from the US. Many thanks for speaking with us. Richard, will the thrust clearly be on the defense sector when Prime Minister Modi visits the US?
Defense will be highlighted. It'll be along with critical technologies and people to people. One of the 3 areas I understand that will get major focus during the visit. We'd love to see increased cooperation. India really kind of is demanding access to intellectual property of U.S. defense material, not simply a buyer-seller relationship, but co-development. And a potential GE engine for fighters is really kind of the nodal there, but it's maybe some work on startups. But also look at a defense strategy. The kind of threats that we see from China are evolving. The different theaters are popping up in new and in different ways. And we need to find how we can collaborate together more effectively to make sure that the regional security remains stable and secure, which, of course, is underpinning such great commercial relations that are starting to bloom.
Richard, I understand that this might also require clearance from the US Congress. What is the process like?
My understanding is Congress shouldn't have to give a nod for this. The Department of Defense should have the ability and authority to sign agreements to allow co-development of technology. But it's a long road. We first announced the intention on looking at jet engine technology all the way back when President Obama visited back in 2015 for Republic Day. And it was very difficult to find a commercial arrangement at that time where both sides would be satisfied on sharing enough intellectual property, but at a level which a private entity that invested all this money, GE, would be comfortable with. But it does feel, since this program was re-announced earlier this year, there's new energy. It really has accelerated, and all eyes are certainly going to be watching closely on whether they've moved far enough to have a formal announcement during the visit. It appears so, and the fact that they're able to do so kind of shows that even things that just less than a decade ago were difficult to move under the current environment are moving much faster than ever were before.
Richard, you already mentioned the common threat of China. The aggression of China is certainly one important aspect, and we are seeing that being one of the reasons for the kind of engagement in the defense sector between India and the United States also. But traditionally, Russia has been India's defense partner, and a lot of equipment has come to India from Russia. Is this also a move by the US to draw India away from Russia?
Well, even before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the United States wanted to prove its interest and value as a defense supplier to India. But of course, the relationship between the United States and India on defense goes well beyond the equipment that we may or may not sell or that we may or may not co-produce. We have a much deeper alignment on shared priorities, and that, of course, focused on China. Whereas Russia is actually developing stronger relations with China during the current environment. The United States and India both, sometimes very different theaters. India is fighting a hot war with China in the mountains and has increasing concerns about China's increased naval presence in the Indian Ocean. The United States very focused on Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, Pacific Islands, East China Sea. So the theater, we may have some differences in terms of which we would prioritize, but China lies at the heart of it. And whereas Russia is looking to expand and build its relationship with China, the United States certainly would like to come in and be a better supplier and better partner to India, because we both agree that China presents the biggest threat that we're both going to face in the coming century.
Richard Rossomei, thanks for speaking with NDTV. Now, as Richard was mentioning, is this collaboration between India and the United States largely looking at China, specifically in the Indo-Pacific? We've seen the coming together of the Quad as well with an eye on China. But now the modern warfare is largely going to be conducted in the sector of space. And therefore, we are likely to see more collaboration between India and the United States to counter China in that area as well, in that space, if I can call it that way. There'll be enhanced space tie-up under ISET. What is ISET? ISET is the Initiative in Critical and Emerging Technology. This was announced by President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi in May last year. Now, while this was announced, the developments have taken place only largely this year. What have we seen now? We've seen the Foreign Secretary, Vinay Mohan Kwatra, having gone to the US just this week itself, taking these conversations further and therefore looking at some of the tangible outcomes that could emanate from the visit of the Prime Minister as well. Now, what are we looking at going forward? The two sides to collaborate further, and this under the ISET as well. It will include global navigation satellite systems. This can be used for providing positioning, navigation and tracking. Now, this certainly is important for the reasons you can well understand that it will be easy to be able to understand and provide positioning and navigation details in this area. Now, this also includes space situational awareness. Now, what exactly is that? This is a knowledge of the space environment, and it includes location and function of space objects. It's critical to protect communication, navigation and observation apps, and this certainly is very important, especially if we are talking of a situation of a conflict, of a war. Then now, if communication lines can be broken, then wars can be lost, and therefore this is very critical to this entire modern warfare, where one can launch a warfare, in fact, without even moving their armies. This can be done in the cyberspace too. Human space exploration and commercial space partnership is also going to be part of the Indo-US tie-up in this space sector. Meanwhile, NASA and ISRO synthetic aperture radar NISAR mission will be launched in 2024. This has already been in fact announced and is in the works. NISAR can systematically map the Earth. It uses 2 different radar frequencies to monitor resources as well. These are critical resources which we are talking about, because it helps in aiding the mapping of resources like water, forests, agriculture. Remember, many also believe that the next war could be fought over water. So all these resources are very critical yet again. With this entire focus, we are seeing this collaboration between India and the United States in space as well, clearly with an eye on China. Well, that's it then for the moment in India Global. We'll catch you again next week on Friday.